Welcome to today's episode of Dr. Apoki's blog Reinvented, where the timeless lessons of Dr. Charles Apoki are brought to life through contemporary storytelling. Get ready to be inspired, challenged, and equipped for growth. I've been reluctant to talk about this topic, but with all the recent happenings, including the trending news about the arrest of an alleged Nigerian online celebrity, I feel compelled to share these observations with you. I received a phone call from a young man who wanted me to mentor him. He asked me a very direct question. Should I accept the invitation to become a Yahoo member? This young man attends one of the trending Pentecostal churches in Nigeria. He's single, earns a good salary for his qualification in present-day Nigeria. But from my conversation with him, I could see that he has big ambitions without a legitimate strategy to actualize them. And this brings me to something I've observed about motivational preaching. Listen to this. If you motivate an idiot or criminal, you produce a more dangerous idiot or a criminal. That's the reality we're dealing with. Now, I want you to understand something about me. I don't consider myself a motivational speaker. I'm what I call a reality speaker, a teacher of developmental Christianity. When I mentor and model for you, I'm sharing what has actually worked in my life. I teach you based on what is demonstrable, transferable, and replicable. You might not get there with ease and speed, but you will get there. You might not become Dangote or Adeleke, but you will be okay. You might not become Bill Gates, but you will be able to pay your bills, and the gates of life and great potentials will open for you. The period of COVID-19 was the most economically challenging for my wife and me. Recently, Reverend Samson Bojo gave me 5,000 naira. That's about 20 USD, and it meant so much to me. I screamed and danced in his presence. I personally had to go sell cucumber twice, and one of my customers was shocked to see that I was waiting for him. I have preached in his church before. For me, I am facing reality. A young man called me, claiming to be from the Central Bank of Nigeria. He said the federal government was distributing 35,000 naira palliative, and he was going to send me a code to enable me to get my own. He reminded me of my year of birth in a bid to convince me, not knowing that my date of birth is in the public domain. I pretended as if I was excited. I shouted, "Hallelujah!" He got more excited with his dirty village accent from southwestern Nigeria and bad grammar until I told him he was a fool and he hung up. Scams and schemes did not start from Nigeria. This is as old as humanity itself. Think about it. Remember how the devil scammed Eve and by extension Adam and the whole human race? I wrote about this in my book, The Power of Knowledge. Even in the Bible we see examples. There's the woman that scammed her friend to cook and eat her child and then refused to bring out her own. There's also the one that laid false claims to the child of another woman after her own died. The case that King Solomon settled. This is another example of what we call obtaining under false pretense in Nigerian law. In the United States of America, William F. Miller, as far back as 1899, was already defrauding people of their funds by promising great returns. He was a bookkeeper, promising very attractive returns on investments. At the end of it all, he had swindled people of more than 1 million. He ended up in jail. Then there's Charles Ponzi born. Carlo Pietro Giovanni Guglielmo Tebaldo Ponzi, who lived from March 3, 1882 to January 18, 1949. He was an Italian from a family whose fortunes had crashed and was prompted to go to America to reverse their fortunes. In the 1920s, he ended up defrauding Americans of millions of dollars in a fraudulent investment pyramid. He had been a serial criminal and fraudulent fellow before then. After he was released from prison, he still tried other get-rich-quick schemes that failed. He eventually died poor and blind in a Brazilian hospital. There's also the case of Victor Lustig, who, in 1925, sold the Eiffel Tower. And get this, he sold it twice. The most celebrated case in recent history is Bernard Madoff, former NASDAQ director who stole millions of investor money. He started off as a legitimate investment broker in the 1960s, but started falsifying returns in early 1990, and he did this for 19 years before he was jailed for a total of 150 years when his scheme burst. Now, let me talk about scams in Nigeria specifically. I grew up to meet scammers in Nigeria. This isn't new. My auntie and, I suspect, my mother too fell for one scheme when I was in secondary school. They were offered a deal to buy drinks from a ship at a very ridiculously low price, and the fellows disappeared into thin air. When I was at the university in the late 1990s, I had an old wayo man, as they were called, residing opposite us. There were the sailormen of Ajegunle in Lagos that lured and defrauded people with the promise of printing currency notes for them. Others offered properties that did not belong to them for sale. Recently, with the advent of the internet, their techniques and scope have expanded. Now they are involved in different spheres, from love scams targeting lonely widows and widowers, to stealing from people's accounts, identity theft, rituals, and all kinds of criminal acts. This brings me to the core of today's discussion, the mind of the Nigerian scammer. I want to break this down into 10 key points that I've observed over the years. First point, they are very heartless people governed by the spirit of mammon. Money is their god. Let me tell you something about the very successful ones. They can be very calm, living very discreet and private lives. They can be very generous and philanthropic with a covering of religious activities. However, they have no sympathy for their victims. Look at Charles Ponzi. He defrauded even his own workers. Bernie Madoff defrauded charities that invested their funds in his scheme. Recently, there was a question online asking if girls would allow themselves to be raped for 4 million naira. Quite a number of girls responded that they were ready to be raped daily to get the 4 million. One said, "Who has virginity helped?" That's how depraved minds reason. Second point, the older generation of scammers in Nigeria are now in their 50s and early 60s, and they occupy very prominent positions in Nigeria. They started with this perception that they were on a vengeance mission to repatriate funds that were stolen by colonial masters and their agents over the years from Africa and Nigeria. They believe that multinationals operating in Nigeria are fraudulent, so there's nothing wrong if they get their own pound of flesh from their nationals too. But here's the truth of the matter. They also scam African Americans, who are victims of slavery, and several innocent people who have never been to or done any business in Nigeria. Third point, they believe everyone does some form of scam. They believe that everybody, especially the elite class in Nigeria, are scammers. Even pastors who pray for them are seen as scammers, and it's a good reason for them to continue. When they see pastors displaying fake miracles in order to get crowds and raise large offerings, they feel that every Nigerian is a scammer. They will mention names of prominent rich people who made wealth corruptly from government cronies. They know those who benefited from undue government leverage and patronage. You know what? Sometimes you cannot put up a sound argument because it is very true in Nigeria. These are the people that are celebrated in religious settings, our communities, universities, and are given national honors. Researchers have found that scammers thrive in very corrupt and poor countries, though they might relocate to other nations like Malaysia, UK, Italy, Japan, Dubai, Turkey, US, South Africa, and Ghana. Fourth point, the Nigerian scammer is narcissistic. The scammers and their gangs see every other person as instruments or objects toward achieving their financial success. They are ready to kill close relatives for rituals. They are ready to kill innocent babies and cut off body parts or genitals of their lovers, mothers, or harlots. Fifth point, they are very desperate to make wealth at all costs, at a very fast rate. That's why young Nigerian males can use bread to eat human excrement. One of them was caught near my town. He was the son of a prominent man in that area. Sixth point, they like enjoyment, conspicuous consumption, and exhibitionist lifestyles. They try to compensate for their former state of poverty, deprivation, and rejection by announcing their arrival. You can see it in the cars they buy, the clothes they wear, and the homes they build. Nigeria is a country where the rich and powerful intimidate everybody. They move around with police escorts. They arrive at ceremonies in grand style. The way they throw money at ceremonies, and the way people scramble to pick the money. It has an orgasmic feeling for them. It reminds them of their dreams in childhood. They want to peppers people. Most of them have one rich African American star they admire or admired when they were poor. There are some I know that when they drive their cars close to mine, they want me to know, Pastor, I have arrived like you. Seventh point, they do not fear the Nigerian police or law enforcement agencies. They believe everything and everybody in Nigeria has a price. There are cases where one of them attempts to outsmart the rest of the gang, and law enforcement agents are involved in settling the case. One officer told the smart Alec, "You know, say this. On a business they require trust." The case was amicably resolved. There have been cases where such smart Alecs were beaten to death and nothing happened. They are ready to go to an ATM to settle any officer and go their way. They have bank managers on their payroll. There are bankers who notify them when money drops. There are pastors who pray for them. When the deal is done, they receive their tithes and offerings. The average religious Nigerian scammer implicates God in his criminality by proclaiming Oluwa is involved or Nah, God win. 8 point. A lot of them set out with positive intentions of alleviating poverty from their families. Like Charles Ponzi, many of them usually start with the mindset that they want to alleviate the suffering of their families. Although there are children of rich families involved too, some continue even after they've become rich. Their company accounts are used to launder money to look legitimate, and they, the dons, receive their percentage cut. Once these young men hammer, which means hit a big score, their mothers and younger siblings are usually the first beneficiaries. The boy buys a car for his mother, and if the father is also criminally inclined, he joins in the groove. The boy starts to reside in a hotel and move with big babes. Here's something shocking. Mothers now take their young boys to internet grand scammers for apprenticeship in Nigeria. So it's seen as a new trade, business, or vocation. 9th point. They believe there are no alternatives. Following from the above reasons, they believe that since the government has provided no jobs, they have no alternative but to be scammers. They initially started with the argument that they were not scamming Nigerians, but as I experienced this morning, I just had an attempt to scam me. Nigerian scammers are extremely intelligent and internet savvy. They know that cougars in the Western world are lonely, rich, and sex-starved. They also know that women outside Nigeria admire our physique, dress style, swag, humor, and extravagance. They know that Caucasian women think the average Nigerian is very strong in bed, so they use that as bait to lure them into their net. Sometimes they use young girls too to lure men who are looking for sex tourism in Nigeria or Africa. They work on the greed of any person who sees Nigeria as a corrupt nation. With great resources, they can quickly exploit and run away. They also know that Nigerians are greedy for quick and easy money. That's why people fall for every and any quick returns investment scheme. They know that Nigerians are naive and trust easily, especially church folks. They target religious WhatsApp groups. They can hack someone's page or number, offer quick return schemes, and before you realize it, people have been duped. They also know that we are envious of each other, so they ask you to keep it a secret. The other reason is that we tolerate and celebrate wealth, even if it's criminal. They will work on your mind that the government wouldn't want such activities made public. They'll give you names of other respectable people involved. Then, it's finished. 10th and final point. They rely on the unpredictability of our systems. They know that many Nigerians are always in a hurry. And because our systems are not predictable, they will put you under time constraints and pressure, knowing that you will most likely not fact check. One recently asked the group to submit their details to their alma mater within a few days to enable the university to compile an online directory. So let me give you some practical advice. Any person proposing anything, no matter how reasonable it sounds, no matter how attractive and rewarding, please be very careful. Always fact check with a very calm and mature person. The issue of scammers in Nigeria is going to increase astronomically and take various dimensions. They are in all institutions, from churches to banks, and they monitor every detail of your life, including this podcast and other content I create. Here's one sad reality I want to share with you. Most scammers end up very badly. They either end up in jail or they end up losing everything and everybody and die very lonely and sick. Listen to this truth: evil never pays. If the devil promises you a pair of shoes, you might lose your feet before you get them. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you've been blessed, please like, share, and subscribe. God bless you.